A small voice came up from the balcony window. "What's the matter, Uncle Derwin?" To Bartholomew, it sounded like the voice of a boy. The king stepped out on the balcony and leaned over the marble railing. "There's a boy in here, just about your age," the king said. "He won't take off his hat." Bartholomew tiptoed up behind the king and looked down. There stood a boy with a big lace collar. A very proud little boy with his nose in the air. It was the Grand Duke Wilfred, nephew of the king. "You send him down here," said Grand Duke Wilfred. "I'll fix him." The king thought for a minute. He pushed back his crown and scratched his head. "Well, maybe you can. There's no harm trying." "Take him to the Grand Duke Wilfred," he commanded, and two of the king's own guards led Bartholomew out of the throne room. "Pooh!" said the Grand Duke Wilfred, looking at Bartholomew's hat and laughing meanly. "That hat won't come off. You stand over there." He pointed to a corner where the wall curved out. "I need a little target practice with my bow and arrow." When Bartholomew saw that the Grand Duke Wilfred only a child's bow, he didn't feel frightened. He spoke up proudly. "I can shoot with my father's big bow." "Well, my bow's plenty big enough for shooting hats." "Especially hats like yours," answered Wilfred. He let fly an arrow. Zzz! It grazed Bartholomew's forehead and nipped off his hat. Away it blew, and over the parapet, but another hat appeared on his head. Zzz! The arrows flew, till the Grand Duke's whole bag full of arrows was gone, and still a hat sat upon Bartholomew's head. "It's not fair!" cried the Grand Duke. "It's not fair!" He threw down his bow and stamped upon it. 154 hats, gulped Sir Alaric. "These hats are driving me mad!" The king's voice rang out through all the palace. Sissy screamed, "Why waste time with a child's bow and arrow? Fetch me the mightiest bow and arrow in all my realm! Fetch the Yeomen of the Bowmen!" "Yeomen of the Bowmen!" echoed all the lords and noblemen of the court. A gigantic man strode out across the terrace. His bow was as big as the branch of a tree. The arrow was twice as long as Bartholomew and thicker than his wrist. "Yeomen of the Bowmen, shoot off this boy's hat," said the king, "and make it stay off." Bartholomew trembled so hard he could scarcely stand straight. The yeoman bent back his mighty bow. Zib! Like a mad giant horn, the arrow tore through the air toward Bartholomew Cubbins. Zap! The sharp arrowhead bit through his hat and carried it off, on and on, for a full half-mile. Excuse me. Zub! It plunked to a stop in the heart of an oak tree. Yet there on Bartholomew's head sat another hat. The face of the Yeoman of the Bowmen went white as the palace walls. "It's black magic!" he shrieked. "Black magic? That's just what it is," sighed the king with relief. "I should have thought of that before. That makes things simple. Back to the throne room! Call my magicians!" In the whole throne room there wasn't a sound as loud as a breath. But from the spiral stairs that led down from the southwest tower came the shuffling of slow padded feet. The magicians were coming. Low and slow they were chanting words that were strange. "Dig a hole 5 furlongs deep, down to where the night snakes creep. Mix and mold the mystic mud. Malbur, balbur, titter, tud." In came 7 black-gowned magicians, and behind each one stalked a lean black cat. They circled around Bartholomew, muttering deep and mysterious sounds. "Stop this useless muttering," ordered the king. "I want a hat that will charm away this boy's hat." The magicians huddled over Bartholomew and chanted, Winkabus, Tinkabus, Father Cheek Clay, hat on the demon's head, fly far away. Howl, men, howl away, howl away, howl away. Yell, cats, yell away, yell away, yell away. Hat on his demon's head, steep away, creep away, leap away, never come back. A mighty good chant, said the king, looking very pleased. Are you sure it will work? All the magicians nodded together. But there still seems to be a hat upon his head, said the king, looking puzzled. How long will it take for the charm to work? Be calm, O sire, and have no fears, chanted the magicians. Our charm will work in 10 short years. 10 years? A decade? Gasped the king. Away, fools! He shouted. Out my sight! I can't wait 10 years to get rid of his hat. Oh dear, what can I do? What can I do? If I were king, I would chop off his head, whispered the Grand Duke Wilfred. A dreadful thought, said the king, biting his lip. But I'm afraid I'll have to. Young man, and march down those steps to the dungeon and tell the executioner to chop off your head, he said to Bartholomew Cubbins, and he pointed to a door at the end of the room. Bartholomew's heart sank to his boots, but he did as the king commanded. I must take off my hat, he said to himself as he started down the long black stairway. This is my last chance. One hat after another he tore from his head. 156, 157, 158. It grew colder and damper. 217, 218, 219. Down, down, down. 231, 232. 233. It seemed to Bartholomew he must be in the very heart of the mountain. Who's there? Who's there? Said a voice from the blackness. Bartholomew turned the corner and stepped into the dungeon. An executioner was whistling and swinging his axe idly because, at the moment, he had nothing to do. In spite of his business, he really seemed to be a very pleasant man. The king says you must chop off my head, said Bartholomew. Oh, I'd hate to. Who's there? Who's there? No, I'd hate to, said the executioner, looking at him with a friendly smile. You seem like such a nice boy. Well, the king says you have to, said Bartholomew. So please get it over with. All right, sighed the executioner. But first, you've got to take off your hat. Why? Asked Bartholomew. I don't know. But it's one of the rules, said the executioner. I can't execute anyone with his head on. All right, said Bartholomew. You take it off for me. The executioner leaned across the chopping block and flipped off Bartholomew's hat. What's this? What's this? He gasped, blinking through the holes in his mask. As another hat sat on Bartholomew's head, he flipped this one off, then another, and another. Fiddlesticks! Grunted the executioner, throwing his axe on the floor. I can't execute you at all. Then he shook hands with Bartholomew and sent him back upstairs to the king. The king had been taking a nap from his throne room. What are you doing back here? He said to Bartholomew, angry at being awakened. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. My head can't come off with my hat on, explained Bartholomew. The executioner said that it's against the rules. So it can't, sighed the king, leaning back wearily. Now, how many does that make together? Well, the execution knocked off 13, and I left 178 more on dungeon steps, answered Bartholomew. 346 hats, mumbled Sir Alaric from behind a scroll. Uncle Derwin, yawned the Grand Duke Wilfred. I suppose I'll have to do away with him. Send him up to the highest turret, and I, in person, will push him off. Wilfred, I'm surprised at you, said the king, but I guess it's a good idea. So the king and the Grand Duke led Bartholomew Cubbins toward the highest turret. Up and up and up the turret stairs they climbed behind them. This is my very last chance, thought Bartholomew. He snatched off his hat. 347. He snatched off another. He pulled and tore and flung them behind him. 398. 399. His arms ached from pulling off hats, but still the hats came. Bartholomew climbed on. 448. 449. 450, countered Sir Alaric, puffing up the stairs behind him. Suddenly, Sir Alaric stopped. He looked. He took off his triangular spectacles and wiped them on his sleeve. And then he looked again. The hat began to change. Hat 451 had not one, but two feathers. Hat 452 had three, and so did 450, and 453 also had three, and a little red jewel. Each new hat was fancier than the hat just before. Your Majesty! Your Majesty! Cried out Sir Alaric, but the king and the Grand Duke were way up where they couldn't hear. They'd already reached the top of the highest turret. Bartholomew was falling just behind.